Alright, so with question 5, we're asked to do a number of calculations with it. Question A does say find without using your calculator the determinant. The determinant's a pretty easy thing to find anyway, so calculator is not overly necessary. If you want to check on your calculator, you're more than welcome to. Anytime something does say without using your calculator, you will be required to show the working out. But even for a more complicated question, like in question 6, it's always a good idea to still check your answer at the very end with a calculator. Alright, so the determinant, A times D, 6 times 3, minus B times C, 3 times 5, 18 minus 15, which equals 3. Question B says find the inverse of the matrix. This one you do not have to do by hand, you can use a calculator for it. It's only a 1-mark question, so if you ever were asked to find the inverse of the matrix by hand, it would be worth more than 1 mark. Inverse of A is equal to 1 over the determinant, or AD take BC. Alright, swap A and D, change their sign. That probably wouldn't give you the full mark. You would need to multiply each of those by 1/3. So 1/3 times 3 is 1. 1/3 times -3 is -1. 1/3 times -5. You can leave that as a fraction or as a decimal. I'll just write it as a fraction. And 1/3 times 6, which is 2. That's the answer to B. Question C. Matrix M equals a 3 by 1. Explain why the inverse of M does not exist. Hopefully you remember back to my video on inverse matrices that to find the inverse of a matrix, the matrix must first be a square matrix. So the rows and columns must be equal to each other. This is a 3 by 1 matrix, it's not square, therefore it does not actually have an inverse. So don't go trying to find the determinant equaling 0 or anything. It's as simple as it's not a square matrix, therefore it doesn't have an inverse. Alright, question 6, a couple more to go. Solve the following pair of simultaneous equations using matrices. Clearly showing all working out. Alright. So, what do we got? We got 2x plus 3y equals 1. And 4x take y equals 9. Alright, first step, put them into matrix form. Excuse me. Alright, so take the coefficients of the first equation, of the second. Now this one doesn't have one in front of it, meaning it's a 1, and it's also minus, so it's -1. Our two unknowns are x and y, and our two answers are 1 and 9. So at the moment we have, this is at A, X and B. So to solve for X, or X and Y in this case, we need to multiply by the inverse of A. Alright, so clearly showing by hand, this one's worth a few marks. That's because there's quite a lot of work to do in it. So I think this one's worth 4 marks. Now we need to just find the inverse of A. First thing I'm going to do is find the determinant, or AB take CD, because that's needed to find it. So 2 times -1 is -2, minus 3 times 4, -2 minus 12, which is -14. So this one's going to be quite complicated. Although you can't use your CAS to fully work this out, you can use it for little parts in there just to make sure your arithmetic is correct. So the inverse of A is going to be equal to negative a 14th. Swap your elements A and D. Change the operation in front of the other two. Alright, so if I was to expand that, I'm just going to write in fraction form. Multiply each of these by negative 1 over 14. I'm going to write this one as 2 over 7 because that's simplified. And negative 1 over 7. So this one is going to be quite complicated. Alright, so to rewrite this, what we now have is xy equaling the inverse of A Alright, now we just need to multiply those two together to get our final answer. It's quite a lot of work to write that all out in full, but it is worth full marks. So write that out in full. Obviously, when you're doing all these fractions multiplied to the whole numbers, you can type that in onto your CAS just to make sure you're getting them correct, because it is quite a lot of mental maths to do. I'll write that out what it looks like in full. So run and dive. You solve that, you will eventually get this. 2 and negative 1. So quite a bit of work for that one number. Hence why it's worth 4 marks though. Question B asks you to do the same thing, but this time using your calculator and showing your teacher your result. So this one you would do, alright, A for your first matrix times x equals b, and you're basically just solving for x and y. So remember that solve function, type the whole equation in, first one times by the xy, remember comma x comma y, the whole thing will look like this. All you really need to do there is make sure you're putting the right coefficients into the equation, like so, and then you just type it into your CAS like that. Depending on your CAS settings, it'll give you either a decimal or a fraction answer, but in this case, x is equal to 7.75. If you got a fraction answer, that'll be 31 over 4. Y would have given you 5.625. Again, if you had a fractional answer, it would have given you 45 over 8. That one's worth 2 marks for x and y. Then question 7, last question, big one though. Oop. Fast forward that part of the video where I have to rub that out. Alright. There are 472 students studying history and 424 studying economics at a university. At the end of the academic year, 25% of students will be awarded a pass grade, 38% will be awarded a credit, 19% will be awarded a distinction, 8% will be awarded a high distinction, and the remaining students will not pass. The column matrix N represents the number of students studying history and economics. Write down the order of matrix N. Alright, so that one's pretty easy. Matrix N, 2 rows, 1 column, it's a 2 by 1. Nice and easy to start off with. Question B. Construct a row matrix to represent the percentages in decimal form of students who will be awarded one of the 5 grades. Alright, so this has a row matrix with 5 elements in it. Now, those 5 elements are going to be at the top end, high distinctions. Then we're going to have distinctions. Then we're going to have credits, passes. And the one thing that a lot of people forget to mention is the fails. The fails aren't given to you in the actual question, but it says the remaining students. Obviously, the percentages need to add up to 100, so you need to work out what's what. Now, higher distinction was 8%. The question says in decimal form, so I need to convert that. 0.08. Distinction was 19%, so 0.19. Credit was 38. Sorry, it's a bit squishy. Pass was 25%. Which, once you work it out, leaves 10%, so 10% have failed. Yours will be a little bit neater than mine. Alright, question C. Evaluate the product matrix A equals NG. Write your answer to the nearest whole number. So NG meaning matrix N by matrix G, which will look like this. So it's a 2 by 1 by a 1 by 5. So what we're going to get left at the end is a 2 by 5 matrix, so it'll be pretty big. Do that on your CAS. So this was called matrix A. Once you type that in, you'll get this. Alright, so in the context of the problem, this first row was history, the second row was economics, and then what we had was fail, pass, credit, distinction, high distinction. So basically this can be used to tell how many students received what marks in what subject. So 161 students in economics received a credit. 90 students in history received a distinction. So then question D says, in the context, explain what element A24 means. So A24, this is matrix A, row 2, column 4 is 81, A24 equals 81. 81 students studying economics received a distinction. Alright, This question's still going. The cost for textbooks for a student studying history is $125. For economics, the textbooks cost $235. When you guys eventually get to uni, for those of you that go, that is very, very true. The textbooks are ridiculously expensive and you don't use them as much as you would like to. Construct a matrix calculation that will give the total cost for textbooks paid in dollars by the students studying history and economics. All right, so it says define it as matrix C. All right, so it's going to be the price of the textbooks multiplied by the number of students. The cost of the textbooks are 125 and what was it, 235? And the number of students was 472 and 424. The reason we've done a 1 by 2 and a 2 by 1 is that will give us a 1 by 1 figure. Now, that one doesn't actually ask us to work it out. It just says construct a matrix calculation. That's going to give us the answer. We don't actually need to work it out until we get up to F. So you put those into your calcs, or if you really want, you can do it by hand. You'll get the figure of $158,640. So to give you a 1 by 1 matrix, the one figure, that will be that one there. And that's it for the short answer. Again, if you have questions or want more things clarified, please let me know in Google Classroom. Hopefully you all went pretty well with that.